Look, from now on, this is your new home. Unfortunately, we don't need a sick person." I was suddenly told that and unwittingly taken by car, only to find myself at my aunt's house before I realized it. "Your father declared that he wouldn't pay for your medical expenses in order to cover the costs of your sister's study abroad." Lost for words, I was in a daze, but my aunt warmly welcomed me. "Sonia, won't you become my child?" she proposed, and from that day, I began a new life as the child of my aunt and uncle. And 10 years have passed. My name is Sonia. I have 2 sets of parents. I regard one set as the worst and deeply respect and cherish the other. You might wonder why I have 2 sets of parents. It's because my illness complicated the bonds within my family. Since childhood, I've had frequent unexplained seizures, constantly requiring attention. While the symptoms are somewhat controlled by medication, stress and fatigue make seizures more likely, which is why my parents strictly told me to avoid exercise. I was always a mere spectator during gym class and couldn't play with my friends freely. On the other hand, my younger sister Noelle, who is 4 years younger than me, was energetic and talented, carrying all of our parents' expectations as she grew up. She was particularly passionate about basketball. In elementary school, she joined a local mini basketball club that was well regarded, and her talent flourished. She later joined a famous sports club. Her skills improved remarkably, and in games she always played as a starting member. As a representative, she led the team and actively competed with older players during practice. I felt proud watching her, yet a little envious. During this time, my parents began to make a clear distinction between how they treated me and Noelle. This was especially true in terms of meals. Noelle received nutritious homemade food. For me, it was mostly simple bread and instant soup. Sometimes I would get leftovers from what Noelle didn't finish. There was also a disparity in clothing. Noelle wore trendy children's clothes, while I was given hand-me-downs. For birthdays, Christmas, and school promotions, Noelle was treated specially, whereas I was often neglected. This discriminatory treatment became a part of my daily life. "Big sister, won't you play basketball with me?" my innocent younger sister would always ask cheerfully. She held the ball and looked at me with shining eyes. "Sorry, I can't do intense exercise," I reluctantly answered. Noelle looked up at the sky, pondering, then suddenly smiled. "We can at least pass the ball, right?" While saying this, she tried to hand me the basketball. I thought I could handle just practicing passes, but my parents disagreed. My mother was especially strict. As I reached to take the ball, she forcefully shook off my hand and yelled loudly, "Sonia, you never know when you might have a seizure, so don't do anything." Startled by her shouting, my sister froze in place. The ball dropped to the ground and slowly rolled away. Picking up the ball, my mother returned it to my sister with a smile. "Noelle, let's practice passing together," she said. After glancing at me, she spoke kindly to my sister and walked away with her. After they left, I felt a deep sadness and irritation, and I cried alone. A memorable event occurred when I was in the first year of middle school, and Noelle was in the 3rd grade of elementary school, on a spring day. I felt unwell from the morning and was bedridden. Due to my sister's important game, my parents left me at home and went to the match. When I'm feeling ill, it'll be more likely for me to have seizures, I thought. The overlap of feeling unwell and being left alone heightened my anxiety, accumulating stress, and by noon I had a severe seizure. Feeling the danger, I immediately called an ambulance. When I woke up, I was on a hospital bed. Just as I woke up, a nurse who came to change my IV noticed and smiled at me. "Sonia, you're in the hospital. Do you understand me?" she asked, and I nodded in response. Looking carefully around, there was no sign of my family in the hospital room. "Excuse me, has my family visited?" I asked. "The family is scheduled to come tomorrow morning. You'll be on your own tonight," the nurse replied. This confirmed that my parents and sister had not yet returned from the basketball trip. Even when I'm taken away by an ambulance, nobody's worried about me. It's like I'm not family, just a nuisance. I thought to myself as tears welled up and blurred my vision. I covered my head with a blanket and cried silently. After being taken away by an ambulance, my parents, facing criticism from the neighbors, started leaving me at my aunt's house, who is my father's sister. My aunt and uncle work at a game development company, and as they had no children of their own, they were always happy to have me over every week. It's fun having Sonia around. It's like having our own child, my aunt would always say. They loved games and would teach me about their favorite ones, which made me look forward to visiting. One notable game was one they developed together, set in a fictional world. It was incredibly engaging, and I would play it for hours. They always served me the same meals they ate themselves. My aunt's cooking was exceptional, and I often asked for seconds. I've always wanted to pick out children's clothes, my aunt said as she joyfully chose clothes for me. Visits to my aunt's house became my emotional support, making me feel cherished and providing a place of solace. As the first term of my first year in junior high came to an end and summer vacation was approaching, my father took me to my aunt's house. The car was packed with luggage, and I was excited about the prospect of spending the summer vacation there. After arriving and unloading my things, my father unusually came inside, appearing to be in a good mood, but my aunt looked concerned. Feeling the unusual atmosphere, I began to feel anxious. However, since my relationship with my father was not very good, I couldn't ask him directly about my concerns. While I was trying to gauge the situation, my father spread his arms wide and cheerfully said, "Look, from now on, this is your new home. Unfortunately, we don't need a sick person." What? I was shocked, and my father's voice was jovial. Even though my aunt and other relatives were angry, it seemed my parents were not listening. Their minds were completely occupied with my sister's basketball scholarship abroad. "To cover the costs of your sister's study abroad, we won't pay for your medical expenses." No matter how much my aunt and uncle tried to persuade them, their efforts did not reach my parents. "If you stop the treatment for her illness, I will take Sonia in," my aunt declared resolutely. My parents readily accepted the proposal. That's how I learned that my parents had let go of me. Speechless and shocked, my aunt gently spoke to me. "Your father said you wanted to leave home too." That's why I agreed. But seeing your reaction now, it seems you weren't told anything. There's still time to fix this. You should have a proper talk with your parents and reach a conclusion. Is it still possible now? We might be able to talk, but repairing my relationship with my parents feels too late. I can't think of them as family anymore. I shook my head vigorously as I met my aunt's gaze. "If it's okay with you, Auntie, I want to stay here. Sonia, I promise I won't be a burden. I'll help out around the house actively. So please let me stay here." I stood up slowly and begged her. "If I were driven out of this house, I would have nowhere else to go. I want to live in your house, Auntie, please." I pleaded, my voice quivering. A sense of confusion hung between my aunt and uncle. I was anxious about how they would react, unable to stop my body from shaking. Then, my aunt gently stroked my head. "Sonia, won't you become our child?" I looked up to see my aunt and uncle smiling warmly at me. "Yes, please," I answered, tears of relief flowing. My aunt, tears in her eyes, hugged me tightly. My uncle, wiping away his tears, watched over us. From that day, I became the child of my aunt and uncle. Eventually, we completed a special adoption process, and I legally became their child. Thanks to this, I was able to actively participate in physical education classes and enjoy playing with my friends. I also saw an improvement in my health and rarely worried about my illness anymore. I am truly happy to be living with my aunt and uncle. Afterward, I started competing in trading card games. Despite the risk of seizures, my aunt and uncle did not stop me but supported me, allowing me to focus on the competition. A strong desire to repay them someday was born in my heart. I joined the trading card club upon entering high school. This school's trading card club is well known in the competitive trading card world. I was excited to grow and develop in such a stimulating environment, and I was happy to be able to showcase my abilities. In my second year of high school, I won the national championship, surpassing other prestigious schools. Unable to contain my joy, I ran home that day to share the good news with my aunt and uncle. By then, the seizures from my illness had almost completely stopped. Before graduating from high school, I was informed by a doctor that my illness had completely healed and I had become as healthy as my sister. After high school, I continued competing in trading cards, with my aunt and uncle always supporting me. When I performed well, they celebrated my success as if it were their own. I started to achieve stable good results after turning 20. Now at 22, I am known as a top player and recognized as the queen of trading cards. It has been about 10 years since I was taken in by my aunt and uncle. I thought it might be time to give something back. Christmas is coming up, and I want to make my aunt and uncle happy, I thought. I made plans while feeling the cold winter air on my way home. Upon arriving, I noticed several unfamiliar shoes at the entrance. I'm home. Is someone here? I asked as I entered the house. In the living room, a high school girl was sitting on the sofa, and my aunt greeted me as I walked in. Welcome back. Who is this girl? I asked reflexively, but she seemed familiar. Wait, that face. Noelle, Sonia? I heard her voice. She had grown so much that I didn't recognize her immediately, but she still had the traces of her younger self. When I called her name, her face twisted as she began to cry. Sonia, you remembered me? I'm so glad, she said. Yes, what's going on? I was unsure how to react, but then my aunt started to explain. Noelle ran away from home. What? I exclaimed, looking at my sister in surprise. Noelle nodded, wiping away her tears. Ran away? What do you mean? Sonia, help me, Noelle said with a trembling voice. Then she began to tell me about what had happened at home. It seems that my father driving me out of the home was a huge shock for her. Noelle had pleaded with our parents, crying, I'll quit basketball, just let big sis come home. However, our father harshly scolded her. What are you saying? It was all for your basketball. You shouldn't do things half-heartedly. I won't accept you quitting. You are your mother's only child. You should work hard and become a respectable player. My mother said in a chilling voice, refusing to take Noelle's words seriously. My parents had thoroughly controlled Noelle's life, forcing her into a basketball-centric existence against her will, from childhood until she was a senior in high school. During a career counseling session, Noelle finally mustered the courage to declare her separation from basketball. Our parents were furious, and my father accused her with a terrifying voice. Hey, do you have any idea how much money we've spent? Your sister sacrificed for you, you're not allowed to stop until you turn pro. Feeling mentally cornered, Noelle escaped to my aunt's house to get away from the situation. I had no idea you were in such a situation, Noelle. I was at a loss for words. While I had been freely raised in my aunt and uncle's home, my sister had been sacrificed by our parents. Noelle, you've been through a lot. I didn't know anything. I'm sorry, I said. My sister quickly shook her head in surprise. No, you've been through so much for me. And still, I'm asking for help. I'm really sorry, Noelle said, looking down. Her small shoulders were trembling. Don't worry about it. I'm really happy you came here, I replied cheerfully. My aunt and uncle nodded in agreement. That's right, it was good to escape from them. Noelle, relax. Your big sister will protect you, I said, though deep down I felt fear and reluctance to get involved. I want to save Noelle, but how should I do it? I thought. and began to make plans. The day to execute the plan was Christmas, a cold day under a winter sky that threatened snow. Returning to my parents' home for the first time in 10 years, I gathered my courage and pressed the doorbell. The door was opened forcefully, and my parents greeted me with, "Welcome back." "Oh, we've been waiting for you," said my father. My parents greeted me with unnaturally bright smiles. They must have known about my return through my aunt. They should also understand that it was about my sister. "Welcome back? Waiting? What are you talking about after you threw me out?" I questioned their attitude, feeling puzzled. My mother, with a cloying voice, took my hand as she spoke. "Come on, it's cold. Let's go inside." "No, it's fine here. I'm busy and can't stay long," I replied shortly, and their faces clouded over for a moment before they quickly put on forced smiles again. Then, they began to speak loudly in an unnatural way. "The queen of the trading card world, huh? Your dad is proud of you. Me too, you've won lots of prize money. I've been bragging about it in the neighborhood, so come back soon," my mother said. Feeling irritated by their behavior, I calmly responded, "Huh? Why?" "Because a family should be together, right?" my father responded. I was appalled by his words and glared at them in disbelief. "How dare you say that after abandoning me?" I screamed internally. However, my parents seemed oblivious to my attitude and continued to sweet-talk me. "Your mother cleaned up your room when she heard you were coming back. We hope you can relax here," they cooed. "And we even replaced the carpet in your room so you can feel comfortable to practice at home. From now on, feel free to ask us for anything," they continued. They kept piling on words, trying to win my favor. At that moment, it became clear to me. These people, they're not really talking about me. They're just boasting to the neighbors. They fabricated a story about how they supported my success as a top-tier competitive card player and bragged about it all around the neighborhood. Sending my sister to basketball studies abroad was also just an action done for the sake of appearances. I watched my parents with a cynical smile. Truly appalling. Your selfish efforts are meaningless. Actually, I'm planning to quit competitive trading card gaming in a few years. What? My parents were shocked. My father was at a loss for words, while my mother looked stunned. Competitive card gaming requires reflexes, concentration, and physical stamina. I can't keep competing with the younger players forever. I plan to retire after earning a bit more prize money. While I spoke cheerfully, my parents were clearly disturbed. "So, what will you do after you retire?" my father asked. "Well, I might be unemployed for a while," I answered with a smile, watching their reaction. The fake smiles on my parents' faces disappeared, quickly replaced by angry expressions. What a nonsense. Being unemployed without a proper job. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that would be at work? I can't even imagine, my father exclaimed. "Yes, so you can forget about me." "I never intended to come back to this house anyway," I replied. "How insolent," my father shouted. His voice echoed through the quiet neighborhood, causing my mother to panic and look around, wary of the neighbors' eyes. "Firstly, I came here today to discuss Noelle's situation. She is currently living healthily with me at our aunt's house." "What did you say? Have you kidnapped her? That's unforgivable. Give her back to her mother." Facing my mother, who suddenly pretended to be a victim, I stared her down and declared firmly, "No, I have no intention of giving her back. Absolutely not. I will take care of my sister." "What are you talking about?" "I will call the police." While they were agitated, I observed them calmly and responded clearly. "I've already explained the situation to the police and reported it to Child Services. I've consulted with a lawyer as well. In fact, you are the offenders." What did you say?" I have been consulting various professionals to continue supporting my sister, considering the possibility of being accused of kidnapping by my parents. I've also been researching legal regulations. Since Noelle has reached adulthood at 18, she can legally decide her own residence and future, surpassing parental rights. Noelle, having left home of her own will to avoid negative influences from our parents, faces no legal problems in choosing to live with me, her sister. With this fact behind me, I confidently confronted my parents and engaged them in this conversation. Staying with you only brings unhappiness. My sister and I are not tools for you to flaunt for your own vanity. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a neighbor appear. Perhaps they had noticed the commotion and came to check what was happening. Now, I'll make the most of this opportunity to create a scene. Everyone. These people stopped my medical treatment to send my sister to basketball studies abroad. Honestly, it's an abnormal situation. If my aunt and uncle hadn't taken me in, I might not be here today. I shouted as loudly as I could. Oh wait, what are you saying? Ignoring my flustered mother, I raised my voice even louder to make my point. You forced Noelle into becoming a basketball player just for your own pride, sacrificing her childhood. Quiet down. My father's face was red with anger, and he reached out to grab me. However, I shook off his hand and continued fiercely. What kind of parents are you, saying you won't accept her quitting until she becomes a professional player? You only see your children as tools. Neither I nor my sister will ever return here. If you try to interfere, I will call the police. Just so you know, I'm already prepared to sue. That's why I came today. I fixed my parents with a stern gaze. They twisted their faces in discomfort and struggled to respond. Looking around, I noticed that many neighbors were watching our intense family argument from their windows and yards. The expressions on their faces showed surprise and concern. I vowed never to visit this place again. With that resolve in my heart, I left the house confidently. Time passed, and 8 years later, I reached a milestone at 30 years old and decided to retire from competitive trading card gaming. Originally, I planned to retire at 25, but I prioritized taking care of my sister and put my life plans on hold. Due to the harsh training she endured as a child, Noelle developed a knee injury, which led her to set a new goal of becoming a physical therapist. She had once dreamed of being a professional basketball player, but had to give up that dream due to her injury. After a year of preparatory school, Noelle finally advanced to a vocational school. During this time, I learned how much she had suffered under our parents, and I saw the harsh reality for the first time when she came to me for help. To make up for her past, I decided to support her tuition. Eventually, Noelle graduated from vocational school and earned her qualification as a physical therapist. She is now fully committed to helping injured athletes. One day, I'll repay you, Sonia. Noelle always says cheerfully. Every time we meet, her face is brimming with vitality. I was sued by my parents for money in court, and the moment it became clear that they couldn't get it, my stepbrother became violent. I've been through many painful experiences, and though it's difficult to look back on them, I want to take this opportunity to share my story in hopes of lightening the burden on my heart, even if just a little. At 28, this is the first time I'm opening up publicly about myself. I hope this story can offer support to anyone feeling isolated. Since I was a child, I always felt lonely within my family. My parents, Sophia and Daniel, were different from typical parents. In my memory, they were both physically and emotionally abusive, causing much of my pain and suffering. I have 2 younger sisters, making me the eldest of 3. While my parents treated my sisters gently, for some reason I was always the target of their anger and frustration. Fearful moments are deeply etched in my memories. My parents would insult and beat me under the guise of discipline. When I was 5, I tried to pour myself a glass of milk, but I didn't manage to do it properly. My father, seeing this, became furious. He grabbed my arm, dragged me into the living room, and pushed me onto the sofa, scolding me, saying, "How can you not even do something as simple as that?" My mother was also there, but she just stood by and watched. Things like this were an everyday occurrence in our household. From kindergarten through high school, school life was also challenging. I was bullied, and the other students knew about my situation at home too. Unlike other children, I couldn't feel the happiness they did. I wasn't allowed to have new clothes and often wore worn-out clothes, which made me a target for ridicule. Even when I wanted to play games with others, I was ridiculed and wasn't even allowed to join. I tried to talk to a teacher about it, but they didn't believe me and didn't seem interested in getting involved. When I entered middle school, the situation worsened. One of the most unforgettable events happened in 7th grade. A group of girls ambushed me in the bathroom, mocking my appearance, shoving me to the ground, pulling my hair, and hurling insults at me. When I tried to escape, one of them grabbed my backpack and threw all my books and belongings into the toilet. They laughed as they humiliated me, and all I could do was stand there, tears streaming down my face. I couldn't confide in anyone about what happened. I understood that standing up for myself would only make things worse. The situation continued even as I moved on to high school. The bullying became even more cunning and cruel, subjecting me not only to physical harassment, but also driving me to emotional despair. My classmates targeted me, spreading malicious rumors about me on social media, with messages that seemed to suggest I should disappear. One day, I found a note in my locker. "No one would be sad if you died." The words of that note have stayed with me to this day. I couldn't get those words out of my head and carried that note with me for weeks. I was completely isolated, with no one to turn to for support. My life at home during high school was also a nightmare. The abuse from my parents only worsened. They constantly put me down, telling me I was someone who could accomplish nothing. My father was consumed by alcohol, and I could never predict when his anger would explode. It was pure fear. One night he came home drunk, furious that dinner wasn't prepared. When I explained that I had class and couldn't cook, he suddenly slapped me across the face. The impact made everything go white for a moment. As always, my mother didn't intervene. Instead, she scolded me, saying it was my fault for making him angry. Somehow I managed to get into college, thinking that I could finally cut ties with my past and start a new life. But the scars in my heart ran deep. I lacked confidence in myself and didn't know how to navigate a normal environment. It was as if I were a shell of a person. From the very first day, college life presented numerous challenges. I found it difficult to make friends or trust others, and by the second year, I was constantly anxious about what the next ordeal would be. My roommate was a person named Jessica. At first, she seemed nice, but soon she revealed her true colors, criticizing my appearance and lifestyle. Knowing that I had early morning classes, she would invite her friends over and throw loud parties that lasted late into the night. When I pointed it out, she just looked at me, laughed, and said, "You should really relax more." One day, when I returned to the dorm, I found the room locked. I had no choice but to sleep in the common living room. However, the next day, she acted as if nothing had happened. There were some positive aspects of college, and a few professors showed concern for me. One of them, Professor Adams, sensed that I was struggling and offered to give me private tutoring sessions. He was incredibly kind and patient, and for the first time I felt I could rely on someone. Thanks to his support, I was able to graduate without failing any courses. However, the wounds from my childhood and adolescence were deeply ingrained. After graduating, I moved to a new town to start a new life. I began working in marketing and tried to move forward, but the traumas of the past continued to haunt me. Building relationships was difficult, and I often found myself in troubling situations. My self-esteem plummeted, and I struggled with depression and anxiety. I eventually met a therapist who supported me, and I began treatment. Thus began the long journey of healing, gradually easing the pain in my heart. One of the toughest challenges was talking about my parents and the abuse. It took me several years to gather the courage, but I finally took action. I wrote a long letter to my parents, detailing what they had done to me and the impact it had on my life. As expected, there was no apology from them. Instead, my mother responded by returning the letter, saying that I was being excessive and ungrateful. My father, on the other hand, showed no reaction, but writing the letter lifted a bit of the weight off my heart. It was a way for me to release a part of my trauma. I am still working hard to heal myself. There are good days and bad days. One of the best decisions I made was to cut off contact with my parents. I was also able to build a small network of people who understand my past and trust me. I can trust people again and feel that I am worth seeking happiness. The road is still long, but I'm moving forward one step at a time. When I first met Dr. Smith, my therapist, I was in a very unstable state. I remember the first session as clearly as if it were yesterday. I was so nervous and anxious that I couldn't even look at her face. Still, Dr. Smith was patient and created a safe environment where I felt comfortable sharing my feelings. After a few sessions, I was able to talk about my childhood. Whenever she spoke to me in her gentle voice, I always looked down. One of the most important moments in my treatment was when Dr. Smith talked about compassion and asked me how I would treat a friend who had gone through the same situation. Would I condemn them or see them as worthless? I would never feel that way. I would treat them with compassion and kindness. She told me that I needed to treat myself in the same way. It was a new feeling for me, but it gradually led to a new way of thinking about myself. We used various techniques to address past trauma, including eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, EMDR. EMDR was a challenging process for me. It required me to recall my most painful memories. But at the same time, I felt it was incredibly effective. Through therapy, I began to feel lighter and more positive. I was considering building a career in marketing. After graduating from college, I joined a marketing company. While I wanted to demonstrate my abilities, my lack of confidence held me back. The first few months at the company were memorable. I was pouring all my efforts into a campaign proposal for a new client. I was excited to present my ideas in the meeting, but my manager, Mr. Thompson, repeatedly interrupted me, questioning my ideas and causing me to lose confidence. I left the meeting in shock, reflecting on what I might be lacking. Dr. Smith helped me analyze the incident. She taught me that Mr. Thompson's behavior said more about him than it did about me. He was known for being critical and harsh, often using his position to undermine others. With her guidance, I was able to clearly present my ideas the next time, supporting my proposal with solid data and standing by my position even in the face of opposition. It was incredibly difficult, but that experience helped me build confidence. Furthermore, I was entrusted with larger projects and I was growing significantly. I understood that facing challenges head-on was essential for overcoming them, so I took on difficult tasks. Then came a campaign to revamp a major client's brand, the largest project I had ever been involved in. This assignment involved significant risks, and along with motivation, I also felt a sense of anxiety. I spent countless hours conducting research, brainstorming ideas, and examining them from various angles, revising them over and over. On the day of the presentation to the client, I felt a level of nervousness I had never experienced before. Surprisingly, however, the presentation went smoothly and the client highly praised my proposal. Moreover, even Mr. Thompson, who had previously been critical, acknowledged my achievement. This was my greatest success and a pivotal moment in my career. I began to feel confident in myself and my abilities. Outside of work, I realized I could accomplish more than I had thought possible. I was also steadily growing in my personal life. Dr. Smith encouraged me to actively explore hobbies and art. I started drawing again, an activity I had enjoyed as a child, and found joy in it. When I joined a local art class, I experienced an incredible sense of healing. It was a way to express myself beyond words and to transform my emotions into something beautiful. Furthermore, I started building a support network. I joined an online community that supports victims of abuse, and connecting with others who had similar experiences provided me with emotional support. We shared our experiences, supported one another, and celebrated each other's successes. Even these small connections were invaluable to my healing process. At work, new challenges awaited, providing opportunities to test my abilities. A new colleague named Lisa joined us. Mr. Thompson held her in high regards. She seemed intelligent, confident, and capable of anything. I feared her presence and felt uneasy about my own significance fading away. It was as though I had returned to my old fear of inadequacy and lack of self-confidence. Dr. Smith helped me work through and overcome these feelings. She taught me that Lisa's success didn't diminish my own value and explained that by cooperating and supporting each other, we could achieve better results for everyone. I took the initiative to offer my support for Lisa's project. To my surprise, she gladly accepted my offer and actively incorporated my suggestions. Together, we achieved great results, and I learned a lot from her. It was an experience that taught me the value of teamwork and the importance of mutual encouragement. As my career progressed, I was given leadership responsibilities and received a promotion. I became a project manager and was entrusted with overseeing a team. This was a significant advancement for me, and I strove to support and encourage my team as a leader. I held regular meetings, ensuring everyone had a chance to share their ideas and opinions freely. I prioritized recognizing and celebrating the team's achievements, even the small ones. Watching the team grow and succeed was an incredibly fulfilling experience. One particularly memorable project was a nationwide advertising campaign for a new product launch. It was a large-scale project with high expectations and a tight deadline. Though I anticipated challenges, I was excited for the opportunity to showcase my abilities. I assembled a talented team and worked closely with them to create a creative and impactful campaign. We worked late into the night each day, and there were moments of anxiety, but we remained united and completed the project together. As a result, the campaign was a tremendous success. The product launch exceeded expectations, and the client was thrilled. The campaign received industry attention and even won an award, marking one of the proudest moments of my career. It was a moment when all the years of hard work and perseverance paid off. Through this experience, I reaffirmed the importance of believing in myself and my own abilities. Dr. Smith always provided support and guidance, teaching me that recovery isn't a straight path, and that setbacks are also part of growth. At times, it felt like starting over, but she reminded me of my achievements and helped me keep moving forward. Among the programs we did, one stood out and resonated deeply with me. It was a therapy exercise in which I wrote a letter to my younger self. Dr. Smith suggested that I write down everything I wished that young girl, who endured so much, had known back then. It was an emotionally stirring experience for me, but it became a way to free my heart. I told my past self that she had a strong and resilient spirit and was deserving of love and happiness. I assured her that the abuse she experienced was never her fault and that a wonderful future awaited her. This letter allowed me to look at myself from a new perspective, reaffirming that overcoming suffering requires inner strength. Now I am living in a much better environment, enjoying life. I've learned to protect my boundaries and to cherish my happiness. My career continues to grow, and I now mentor newcomers to the industry. Being in a position to guide others and help them overcome their own challenges brings me immense fulfillment. Looking back, I can see just how far I have come. The journey of healing continues, but I feel that even a difficult path is worth taking, one step at a time. I've learned that sometimes it's essential to rely on others and allow them to support me while treating myself with kindness. I've also realized I possess more strength than I once thought. life gradually moved in a positive direction. My career was going well, I maintained healthy boundaries with harmful people, and I continued therapy. Just when I felt I had finally overcome the past, a letter arrived, shattering that sense of hope. To my shock, I was being sued by my parents. The reason for the lawsuit was absurd. They claimed I should repay the costs of raising me. Furthermore, they said that once the trial was over, they planned to request financial support from me to help raise my adopted stepbrother, Jacob, making me feel as though all the independence and growth I had achieved was being denied. I resolved to stand up against this. The court date was set for Monday morning, and although I felt anxious, I entered the courtroom with a strong sense of self-belief. I sat on the opposite side from my parents. Next to me was my lawyer, Mr. Grant, while Jacob, my unfamiliar stepbrother, sat confidently by my parents' side. Although Mr. Grant assured me that our position was strong, my anxiety didn't fade. The first day of the trial was grueling. My parents' lawyer, Mr. Edwards, confidently laid out their case, arguing that my parents had shouldered substantial financial burdens for my sake and that it was necessary to compensate them. He described my parents as loving and devoted. When it was our turn, Mr. Grant calmly dismantled their claims, presenting some evidence of the abuse I had suffered. He strongly asserted, using my therapy records and testimonies from witnesses of their behavior, that I had no obligation to support my stepbrother. That week was intense, with the courtroom turning into a battleground, each day presenting new challenges and waves of emotion. On Tuesday, my mother took the stand, shedding tears with a dramatic performance. She tearfully claimed that she had always dedicated herself to me and couldn't understand why I felt abused. Despite my anger at her false tears, I remained composed. Then, on Wednesday, my father's testimony began. During his testimony, he took an aggressive stance, accusing me of being selfish and ungrateful. He even raised his voice in anger, directing his fury at me from the witness stand. The judge intervened, warning him about his attitude and instructing him to remain calm. Mr. Grant skillfully exposed the inconsistencies in his testimony. Thursday was the hardest day for me. Jacob took the stand. He was a teenager, probably 16 or 17 years old. When he looked at me, his eyes were filled with hatred. He claimed that the lack of support from my side had deprived him of proper education and opportunities. It was clear that my parents had instilled a sense of malice toward me in him, and it was painful to see someone so young harboring such intense anger. By Friday, I was utterly exhausted, but I took the stand with a sense of determination. The composed and supportive Mr. Grant guided me through my testimony, helping me speak about the abuse I had endured and the many years I had been manipulated. I explained the trauma from my past and the steps I had taken to overcome it. At that moment, I noticed the jury. They were listening intently, and some of them were visibly moved by my story. The weekend passed quickly, with preparations and tension leading up to the final day of the trial. It was clear that Monday would be crucial for us. Mr. Grant and I meticulously prepared, ready to address any statements Mr. Edwards might make. When Monday arrived, the courtroom was filled with a palpable sense of tension. Mr. Edwards gave his closing argument, strongly asserting that my parents were the victims. In response, Mr. Grant delivered a powerful speech, reminding the jury of the abuse I had endured and emphasizing that my parents bore responsibility for it. During this, my parents remained silent. A long period passed, and the jury left the courtroom to deliberate. Each tick of the clock heightened the unbearable tension as time weighed heavily on us. Eventually, the jury returned, and the verdict was finally delivered. I had won. An overwhelming sense of relief filled my heart, and I realized that I had triumphed before my parents. As the judge announced the verdict, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. At that very moment, an unexpected event occurred. Jacob, who had shown uncontrollable anger throughout the trial, suddenly ran toward me. He was holding a baseball bat. The courtroom erupted in chaos, and someone screamed. He swung the bat at me. I managed to dodge, but the bat grazed my arm, sending a sharp pain through me. The security guards forcefully restrained Jacob, pinning him to the ground as he screamed in a fit of rage. The courtroom was in turmoil, with people trying to grasp what had just happened amid the confusion. Mr. Grant and the security guards quickly escorted me out of the courtroom. Once outside, my heart was pounding, and it took a moment to regain my composure. The adrenaline was still surging through my body, and a dull pain lingered in the arm where the bat had struck. Mr. Grant promptly arranged for an ambulance, and I was taken to the hospital for evaluation. Fortunately, the injury wasn't severe, but the incident was a shocking experience for me. Jacob's outburst only worsened the situation, and my parents claimed it was my fault for intentionally provoking him, trying to dismiss his actions as nothing more than childish tantrums, hoping to turn the incident to their advantage. However, Jacob's assault had been clearly captured on the courtroom surveillance cameras. Jacob was immediately taken into custody. Although my parents tried to distort the incident to suit their narrative, within days, the media began to take interest, with reporters seeking details about the trial and Jacob. I refused all interviews, focusing instead on healing and rebuilding a positive life. During this time, Mr. Grant arranged for a restraining order against my parents and Jacob. Although the shock of the assault lingered, they would never be able to come near me again. I felt that, through the trial, I had confronted my past and was finally able to close that chapter. I had won the case, and I continued seeing Dr. Smith for counseling afterward. She helped me calmly process the recent events and confront the residual fears and anxieties in my heart. She reminded me that I was now steering my own life and was no longer a victim. Through this experience, I gained an even stronger resilience. I became an advocate for others who had suffered from abuse, sharing my experiences in support groups and online talks. My work was going well, and I felt a profound sense of accomplishment in helping others heal their emotional wounds. Then, a few months later, a special opportunity arose. After the trial, I was invited to speak at an event for people facing adversity, where I shared my story from the stage with an audience. At that moment, I realized that it's not the past events that shape us, but rather the strength to confront them and the belief in ourselves. Life is far from perfect, and I still encounter difficulties, but I am now certain that I can overcome any trial. This experience has strengthened my heart immensely. I am now determined to help others find their own strength based on my own experiences. Following the incident in court, Jacob was arrested and charged with assault. The security camera had clearly captured the moment he attacked me, leaving undeniable evidence. The trial proceeded quickly, and given his age and the severity of the assault, a guilty verdict was reached. As a result, he was sent to a juvenile detention center. The judge determined that Jacob's deep-seated issues stemmed from the influence of our parents and mandated therapy for him. The impact of Jacob's actions reverberated through the entire family. Child Protective Services, CPS, stepped in and began a detailed investigation into whether my parents were fit to raise children. The abuse I had suffered, as well as the lack of proper support and environment provided to Jacob, came to light, exposing the harsh realities of the household. CPS concluded that my parents were unfit to continue parenting and decided to revoke their legal guardianship rights. Jacob entered a rehabilitation program in the juvenile center, and the other foster children in my parents' care were also removed for their protection. This unexpected development stirred many emotions within me. I felt that the time had finally come for my parents to face the consequences of their actions, and I felt validated in my position. At the same time, it was painful to witness the severe impact my parents had on Jacob. I hoped he would find healing amid the turmoil and discover a path to a brighter future. Through therapy, I found my own healing. Dr. Smith, my therapist, became a reliable source of support as I coped with the aftermath of the trial and the assault. She encouraged me to focus on the positive changes in my life and to build a future rather than being held back by the past. Thanks to her, I began opening my heart to new relationships. Though I had once been cautious with others, I realized that connection with people was essential to the healing process. It was around this time that I met John. We were introduced through a mutual friend at a dinner party. He was gentle, humorous, and incredibly kind, and we quickly became close, forming a deep bond. We shared a similar passion for art and travel. I had never felt such a profound connection with someone before. Our friendship soon evolved into something deeper, and we began dating. However, our relationship also faced its challenges. I opened up to John about my past. He trusted me to an astonishing degree, yet I sometimes still felt anxious and worried. Trusting someone wasn't easy for me, and there were times when I felt overwhelmed by my insecurities. But he was always patient, consistently willing to talk things through to understand me, easing my anxieties. Around 6 months into our relationship, an unforgettable moment occurred. We had planned a short weekend trip to a mountain cabin, intending to unwind and relax away from everyday life. However, on the first night, I had a nightmare about being attacked in the courtroom. I woke up in terror, and John rushed over to me as I panicked. He held me gently as I cried, comforting me by saying, "It's okay, I'm here with you." At that moment, I realized my feelings for him were unwavering. I knew he was more than just a partner. He was someone who genuinely cherished me and would always be there to support me. I began envisioning a future with John. We shared our dreams and goals and discovered that we held the same values. As our relationship reached its 1-year mark, John planned a date reminiscent of our first, ending with a proposal. Our engagement period was filled with days of excitement for the future. We held a warm wedding, surrounded by close friends and family. On our wedding day, in a beautiful garden filled with blooming flowers, we exchanged our vows in the presence of our loved ones. As I stood holding John's hand, looking into his eyes, I felt peace and joy I had never experienced before. The ceremony became a time to celebrate love and resilience. Friends from my support group, colleagues, and professors who had supported me during college attended, including Professor Adams, whose presence was a delightful surprise. He had encouraged me throughout my studies, and it was a precious moment to celebrate this special day together. It was a symbol of the new family I was building, based on choice and mutual respect. One of the most memorable moments of the ceremony was Lisa's heartfelt speech at the reception. Lisa, too, had overcome her own struggles, and through her speech, we reaffirmed our bond. She spoke proudly of my growth, my newfound happiness, and the strong path I was now walking. Her words brought tears to my eyes, and her friendship and support became a cornerstone in my married life. After the wedding, John and I started our new life together. We found a comfortable apartment and began decorating it with art pieces and memories we shared, envisioning our future. We traveled together, found new hobbies, and continued supporting each other's dreams. John encouraged me to pursue art more seriously, which led me to pick up my paintbrush again. I even held a small solo exhibition locally. It was a significant step for me. Work was going well too, and I was promoted to a senior position. As a new project manager, my responsibilities increased, but I was eager to take on new challenges. One of the largest projects I led was a marketing campaign for a nonprofit organization focused on mental health awareness. This project held special meaning for me, and I poured my heart into it. The campaign was successful, raising awareness and funding for mental health services. It was incredibly fulfilling to know that my work had a positive impact on the world. As time passed, John and I began discussing expanding our family and made the decision to adopt a child. We both wanted to restore the love and support that each of us had once lost. The adoption process was long and sometimes frustrating, but it was worth every moment. We were finally united with a lovely little girl named Mia. The moment we welcomed her into our family was an irreplaceable, joyful experience for us. Mia brought so much happiness and light into our lives. Parenthood was a fresh and exciting challenge, and John and I continued to provide loving support, navigating the sleepless nights and the joys and sorrows of Mia's growth together. In doing so, we were able to break the cycle of abuse and neglect we had experienced, providing her with a nurturing environment. Her smiles and curiosity constantly remind me of the new life I've built from my past experiences. I continued attending therapy, with Dr. Smith remaining a steadfast source of support. She became an essential figure in helping me balance work and parenting, sharing strategies to navigate life's ups and downs. Her guidance was invaluable to me, and without her support, I wouldn't have come this far. Looking back, I see how I've grown from a frightened child living in fear of abuse to someone confident, surrounded by a loving family. I never imagined my life would turn out this way. Though there remains a bit of the old pain, it has become part of my story. A symbol of healing, resilience, and hope for the future.